Hello, my lovely Natsukis. It's your bestie Summer, and apologies for the background noise as usual. I know I say this every chapter, but my siblings are fucking loud. But yeah, freaking, I just woke up. Well, technically I woke up like 30 minutes ago, but I've been lying in bed like all day. Yeah, I don't really have much to say today. I did a lot of art stuff last night. I sort of Sharpied my wall last night. Now I have stars on it. Really cute, really pretty. I drew something that also has stars on it. Really cute, really pretty. And I hot glued monster cans to my wall. It's a rainbow. So, yeah. Gay. And I moved one of my posters over, and then I hot glued "If You Can't Hang" right above my door, and then I hot glued a little star that has an arrow on it pointing down to the door, and then I'm gonna put "There's the Door" as a Sleeping with Sirens lyric for the song "If You Can't Hang." Because like, why not? And I have to clean my room. I've been doing so good on keeping it clean, but it's like messy now, and I can't let it get back to the thing that it was like a week ago. Also, I have D&D the day after tomorrow. Ooh, fun. Slay. And that's about it. I don't really have much to say this time. Again, apologies for the background noise. It'd be like that when you have 4 siblings. And yeah, that's about it. So without further ado, this is part 6, chapter 6 of It's a Reflex, a DPXTC podfic written by Coffee Loving Hermit and read by Summer Audio. Enjoy! Beginning notes. They sonified a whole entire fucking nebula. I love jellyfish and really love space. And they brought sound to a nebula named Jellyfish IC443. It's amazing, and it sounds like water droplets, and I almost cried from joy the first time I heard it. It's beautiful. I got a little too comfy flinging myself around again and caught the back of my head on my desk corner. Oops. On an unrelated note, I might have had a concussion while finishing the last chapter, so hopefully the ending didn't seem too weird. Also, why did it take so long for this to come out? LOL. Enjoyed Mothman and Shark George. Tremors of phantom pain from the ghost of a memory of his death tore through his body. Danny was able to ignore it when he was talking with Duke and Tim, but now that there was nothing to focus on, it was hard to hold back his tears. Danny couldn't stop himself from shaking as if he were still being electrified. Chilled, salty air, ironically enough, helped to ground him, as the air in the basement was heavy, stale, and smelled like ozone. Out here on the wet and windy bridge, there was no electric thrum of energy, no muted screams of his friends, nor the hair-raising static feeling of ectoplasm. Just the waves lapping at the bridge's columns, and the low talking of his 2 new friends on the other side of the bridge. Taking a shuddering breath, Danny ran his palm against his NASA hoodie just to remind himself that he's not wearing a pointless hazmat suit. Faint impressions of boiling heat from the portal brought Danny over to the cold railing so that he could further ground himself in the present. Gripping hard enough on the railing that his hand left indents, Danny stared off into the foggy city and slowly breathed out. After a few moments, calming himself from his potential anxiety attack, Danny lessened his grip and forced himself to relax the rest of the way. What a day. Grumbling at the minor reliving of his death, Danny kicked at the railing. Propping an elbow on the railing and putting his head on his hands, Danny huffed at his reaction of even vaguely talking about the incident. He was able to field off the anxiety attack, but all it left him with was frustration towards himself. Why do I have to be so sensitive about it? I'm still alive, so there's no reason why I should be acting this way. Why can't I just get over it already? Getting worked up over making a stupid little joke. I'm so pathetic. Jazz's words floated through his mind. You're allowed to feel what you want to feel about things, Danny. You might see yourself as something else, something different and something dangerous, but don't forget that you're still you. What happened was traumatic, it was a traumatic event, and you're so strong to turn the most traumatizing thing that happened to you into something good, because you're good, Danny. My little brother is doing something amazing, and he's the best of us all. And I truly hope that someday he'll realize that. It saddens me to think that my amazing little brother doesn't realize how strong he really is. Danny chuckled weakly, but warmly smiled at Jazz's words. Wiping away his tears that had gathered, he stood up straight and looked over his shoulder to see what his friends were up to. It looked like the two were in an argument that involved a phone. Duke was holding it above his head and leaning away from Tim while he was trying to grab it out of Duke's hand. Seeing them push and shove each other soothed the rest of his anxiety as Danny laughed at their antics. Feeling more like himself, Danny walked over to them and was able to catch the tail end of their fight. The worst! Duke shouted at Tim. I refuse to let you do it. Do what? Just as Danny had walked up next to him, Tim swung at Duke's arm, which then roughly hit the truss. All three of them watched, stunned, as Tim's phone slipped out of Duke's hand. Not one moved a muscle as the phone hit the railing, then landed on the edge of the bridge's platform. It teetered, then tumbled off and into the hazy darkness below, and a few seconds later a plop echoed from under the bridge. For a moment, they all stood still. Then Tim slowly turned his head to face Duke, who was still looking down into the void that ate the phone. You're buying me a new phone, Tim growled out, and he jabbed a finger at the other team's chest. Duke's face paled under Tim's scrutiny, so Danny decided to help out his friend. Coughing into his fist to get their attention, Danny started talking. Actually, I can just get it for you. Your phone might be bricked, but your SD card should still be fine. Tim's face scrunched up, but Duke looked like he could cry from happiness. Please. Duke held onto one of Danny's shoulders with one of his hands. His friend leaned in and held his other hand on his mouth and loudly whispered, Tim's scary as hell when he wants to be. Tim rolled his eyes and crossed his arms, but didn't deny it. I owe you big time for this. In response, Danny smiled and gave him a thumbs up before walking over to the railing and lifting a leg to climb over it. When he had one leg slung over, a hand on his forearm stopped him. Looking up, Danny saw Tim staring at him with a calculated and steely gaze that made him feel like prey. Earlier, you were talking about how the bridge jumping is dangerous, even with equipment, and yet you're doing it without being prepared. Do one or both of your powers allow you to do these kinds of stunts? Startled at someone so openly caring for him, all Danny did was just blink dumbly at him. At Danny's continued silence, Tim rose an eyebrow and squeezed Danny's arm before letting go and crossing his arms again. Yeah, I'll be perfectly fine. Though, if I don't get your phone soon, it won't be. Tim gave Danny a scrutinizing glare, and he tried not to fidget as it made him feel as if he was under a microscope. Eventually, Tim sighed and waved a hand over his shoulder as he turned on his heel and walked down a little to lean on the railing. You don't need to worry about my phone all that much. It has the necessary additions to survive taking a plunge into the river, but I would greatly appreciate you getting it for me. A snort came from Duke. You're acting like a snob again, Tim. Making eye contact with Danny, Duke continues speaking. That's Tim speak for, thank you for offering to help me, but you really don't have to if you don't want to. Ignore his words, though. Tim really does appreciate you for offering to get his phone back. Duke smirked as he jabbed a thumb in Tim's direction. I'd say he's all bark and no bite, but he's too much of a cat to bark. A strangled yell came from Tim, and Danny laughed so hard his grip slipped and he went over the railing. Falling off the bridge, he couldn't help but laugh even harder at the yelling and curses. Turning himself intangible, Danny slipped into the murky water. Grinning to himself, Danny let his ghost side slip through. Good thing that I'm a flashlight in this form. It'd be a cold day in hell trying to find that phone without any light. Chuckling at his own puns, he felt for sensation of the river's current passing through his body, and Danny gauged how quickly the water was going. After doing all of the necessary calculations, he shot off to the most likely area the phone would be in, which was going to be on the other side of the bridge and beyond. It took a few moments, but he was able to get in the right area. Waving his arms around and amping up his glowing, Danny felt his non-existent heart practically burst out of his chest. Out of the corner of his eye, above him, Danny saw a gigantic shadow form slowly approaching and getting within arm's reach. Slowly bringing out an arm and keeping his entire body intangible because fuck that shit, Danny glowed brighter to see what almost gave his form a heart attack, at the ripe old age of 14. Danny yelped and instinctively pulled back his arm as a gaping white mouth appeared from the darkness. The mouth seemed like it could swallow Danny whole, and as it kept getting closer, he distinctly realized that there was a tiny black rectangle at the bottom of this humongous creature's mouth. He stayed frozen as the creature floated for what seemed like hours. After the second set of fins went by, Danny jolted as he now understood that this was some type of shark. A shark with an almost 14-foot wide mouth. Dumbly, he kept watching it slowly swim past him. Once the tail fin finished into the darkness, Danny remembered that Tim's phone was sitting inside the shark's mouth. Dying a little more on the inside, Danny swam after the nightmare-inducing shark. Fright Night is less terrifying than this shark. Tail fin in sight and the rest of the humongous body hidden in the void, Danny began mentally measuring the length of it. He got to the mouth and quickly snatched the phone out of the mouth and backed up a little bit to watch the shark. The horrifying yet oddly graceful shark was slowly but surely swallowed up by the black waters of the Gotham River. That shark must have been like 30 feet long. What are they feeding it? Clutching the phone close to his chest, Danny zoomed back to where the bridge is. If I was alive right now, my soul would have left my body. Those two so fucking owe me. Dimming himself, Danny peeked out of the river, seeing the bridge's support columns looming above him and into the fog made his feet ramp up again, but he steadfastly ignored it. Sliding back into a living human, Danny kept up his intangibility and flew upwards. Looking around the small area between the bridge column and truss that would shield him from any prying eyes, flying up it, Danny got ready to catch himself on the railing, then let go of both his flying and intangibility. Sounds of talking from the side where Danny fell off the bridge registered just as his hand smacked against the metal, and they stopped talking. Cringing at the loud ringing, Danny swung over the railing and looked up to see Duke and Tim rushing over to him. "What kind of fucking idiot are you?" Duke hollered and cut off what Danny was about to say. "No, don't answer that, because I don't think I want to know the damn answer." Danny's shoulders went up to his ears. The two teens skidded to a stop right in front of Danny, and Duke started patting down Danny to look for injuries while Tim circled them. Duke kept talking. "Doing something like that without warning us isn't something that you should do. Anything could have happened to you, and we wouldn't know a damn thing. If you've got it handled or if you're in trouble, Tim and I don't have anything on us that would let us go after you. Danny, you need to be more careful." The rant was ended with Duke hugging Danny as if he would get hurt if Duke let go. Oh, I didn't even think about how they would react to me falling off a bridge, but Duke knows that I wouldn't get hurt. I showed him my journal entries about my intangibility in flight. Why is he so scared about me getting hurt? Tim stalked back into view. "I agree with Duke. Not telling us that you're about to let go of the railing could have been dangerous. If Duke hadn't held me back, I would have gone after you because I wasn't aware of how your powers worked until he told me. Besides..." Tim narrowed his eyes as Duke tightened his grip. "There's always a chance of your powers failing when you least expect it. If they had failed, we wouldn't have known until it was too late for a rescue, and Duke would have been forced to call the police for a body recovery. A phone isn't worth your life." To hide his guilt at freaking out his friends so badly, Danny shoved his face into Duke's shoulder and hugged him back, phone still clutched in his hand. "I didn't mean to worry you guys." He squeezed Duke before letting go and tried to step back, but Duke held on. "I'm confident in my powers being able to work. Not to mention that my friends and I are used to me pulling similar stunts. I wasn't thinking about how you guys would react to me just falling off the bridge without proper warning. Sorry." Duke wetly chuckled and patted his back before letting go, but kept a hand on Danny's shoulder. "It's alright. Just give us a warning on what you're gonna do next time, alright? Or better yet, don't do that kind of stuff ever again." Not trusting his voice at the sudden onslaught of worry for him, Danny nodded. Tim shook his head and held out a hand, so Danny plopped Tim's phone on his palm. "Heart attack aside, how did you even find it?" Duke covered the bare bones of what you could do, but they wouldn't have helped you find a black case phone in the Gotham River at night. Tim was closely inspecting the phone. "Well, I'm pretty good at math." That got a raised eyebrow from Tim. "I am. Since I can't be an astronaut anymore, I decided to go into the astrophysics and engineering field." Duke punched his shoulder and smiled. "You'll be great at it, Danny. If you could do the math to pinpoint Tim's phone in a fast-paced river like this one, then I have full faith that you'll be able to shoot for the stars." Duke and Danny laughed. "Well, if you two are done being jokesters, can we start hunting for Mothman? Some stuff came up last minute, and I need to plan for my goals, figure out a timeline, and bring in another person or two." Danny stared at Tim, who was frowning while tapping his foot impatiently. Wow, that guy sure can sound like a business person with how formal and pushy he is. He uses such a weird mix of formal and informal words. Like, does he have an identity issue or something? Tim doesn't even sound like the same person sometimes, but that's fair. So I can't even judge him for that. He seems like the type of person to have a work and home personality. Duke snorted, but responded to Tim. Yeah, Danny and I were making plans earlier when you fell asleep eating. After you went for a little nappy-wappy time, Danny and I tested out to see how our powers would work with each other. Tim's head snapped towards Duke so quickly, Danny was surprised that the teen didn't get whiplash. You what? Tim looked out through his teeth. Oh boy, if looks could kill. Hopefully you didn't overshare, did you? Duke raised his arms and took a step back. Dude, chill. We only got the basic shit figured out. Danny and I spent most of the time going over plans for Mothman. Tim gave Duke one more withering glare, then slid his gaze over to Danny. With a gulp, Danny went to defend himself. It's true, I promise. It was really just us getting familiar with how our powers worked together. After a beat, Tim rolled his eyes, then waved a hand at them. I'll take your word for it as truth for the time being. Can we get started now? Duke squinted at Tim, but began talking about their plans. Right, well, Jenny and I thought up of 3 plans to find Mothman. First one is where he and I look under the bridge and you scope out the top. Second is I'm hosted up to one of the trusses by a rope where I'd then make a light to try and lure Mothman with. The third is that we just do a light show and make a lot of noise. That's all we really got. Alfred the cat walked in and distracted us before we could do any more planning. Danny nodded along, full-heartedly agreeing with what they had come up with. If only Team Phantom could see me now, planning ahead of something instead of just rushing in head first. He didn't feel so good about their plans when Tim face-palmed, though. Said teen let out a long, strangled yell. Both he and Duke looked at each other in alarm and motioned for the other to talk to Tim. Our plans aren't that bad, are they? No, just no. I would say the best one is the first one, but that would mean I agree with the idea of you two saying that throwing yourselves off a bridge trying to catch Mothman is a good idea, because it isn't. Tim dropped his hands and looked up in the night sky and kept talking. The second option is also stupid because that involves being in an unnecessary vulnerable position when you could just use the climbing gear like any normal person would. Did you guys forget that climbing gear was packed or something? Don't even get me started with the third plan. That's just asking for everyone but Mothman to show up. Hearing that breakdown made Denny feel pretty stupid in hindsight. Shoulders hitching up to his ears out of embarrassment, Danny shoved his hands into his pocket and kicked the ground. Those plans are pretty dumb, aren't they? Stupid Fenton. Can't even make a good plan for a stupid cryptid that's not even real. As Danny was stuck wallowing in self-hatred, he missed the pointed whisper that Duke and Tim cut into each other. Duke grabbed Danny roughly by the shoulder and dragged him a bit away from Danny. Dude, he's just a kid. Chill the fuck out. Danny was super excited to do something with us, and you just ruined this for him. Tim looked back at Danny and grimaced, but Duke kept going. We've both picked up that he has had some serious issues going on, and that lab accident of his is sketchy as hell. The kid was just starting to open up. With every pointed word, Duke shook Tim. Let him fucking have this. Tim grabbed onto Duke's forearm to get him to stop shaking him. So, Danny's definitely old enough to know better by now, and you especially should have known better. What if one of you got hurt because you didn't flesh out your plans, huh? This might be a fun little adventure for you two, but I'm the oldest one here, so that means I'm in charge. Tim threw off Dick's hands and poked the younger brother in the chest. If any of you get hurt, that's on me, and I don't plan on you two getting hurt. We have to plan for the worst outcome and then some, even when we're playing pretend. Duke took a step back, but pinned him down with a heated glare. Duke hesitated before arguing once again. That doesn't mean that you should just shit on something that he made and is excited for. You could have been more careful with your words, or just suggested doing something else for fuck's sake. How about you apologize to him and you get to make any changes to it within reason and without shitting on him more than you already have? Tim paused to think it over. The teen looked back at Danny, who was looking in the direction of where the car was parked. Oh, right, I might have been a bit harsh, but I stand by what I said. It was fully deserved because those plans are terrible. Tim faced Duke once again and took in a slow, deep breath, then quickly exhaled. The second one is the best one, but couldn't you just climb up the trusses instead? Duke's face pinched, and he shook in his head. Within reason, Tim. Danny wanted to pull me up the bridge, so we're keeping that in. Tim hummed to himself as he brought a hand up to his chin to think. Neither of them noticed Danny walking up to them. How about we make the knot secure so that in case you fall, you don't fall off the bridge? Then, as a precaution measure, we'll throw the rope up and around the truss twice to act as a stopper in case. Both Tim and Duke startled as a voice spoke up behind them. Mothman grabs onto Duke and tries to fly away with him. Duke hunched over, so he grabbed onto Tim to steady himself while Tim froze in place. Oops, sorry about that. I didn't mean to scare you guys. My friends keep saying that I'm as silent as a ghost for a reason, you know. Danny felt his face heat up at the pun he didn't mean to make. Too close to home, in more ways than one. Oh man, please be stupid enough to not look too closely about it. Duke let go of Tim and coughed into his fist. Uh-huh. Well, I just talked some sense into Tim, so we were just fleshing out the details of the second plan. Duke's voice went higher and higher the longer that Danny stood there blankly staring at him. Oh, Danny said. They were pretty stupid now that I think about it. We don't have to do them if you don't want to. We could just follow Tim around and help him take photos or something. He didn't know why exactly Duke spun around to give Tim a death glare and why Tim frowned down at the ground, but didn't comment on it. Tim shook his head and focused on Danny. No, what I said was pretty rude. You two can still hunt for Mothman, and I can just take photos of you guys in the process. After talking it through with Duke and fixing up a little, we both agreed on the second option. A warm feeling flooded through his chest, and Danny beamed. Awesome! I'll tell you guys about what I saw in the river while we get started. Duke and Tim shared a horrified look. I better not have just taken a swim with a river full of bodies, intangibility or not. I am so taking a shower after this. Duke glanced at Danny as the group walked to where the backpacks were left when Tim was messing with his camera. So, will I have to make any calls? Oh, ancients, damn it, I feel so nasty now. Well, besides the sudden and extreme urge I have to take a long and hot shower, I can say with confidence that no calls need to be made. The only thing I saw was a living being and no longer the most terrifying thing in the river. While Danny was talking, they had reached the bag pile and retrieved the rope. They started walking over to a truss as Tim began to tying a complicated knot. Not my circus, not my monkey. No need to know why Tim just knows how to tie something like that. It looks like a shark, but it also didn't. I guesstimate its length, and it was about 30 feet long, and it had a huge white mouth that was like a circle and 3 feet wide. Danny spread his arms out wide and almost smacked Duke and Tim, but they both dodged as if they had eyes on the back of their heads. Not willing to question that either, Danny kept going as the other two started to put Duke into the knot. It's actually where I found your phone, Tim. I think that the current put it into the shark's mouth because it was sitting at the bottom of its mouth. Tim gave Danny a strained smile as he subconsciously patted his pocket where he had his phone. Really? How delightful. My phone choosing an interesting resting spot. Aside, I think I know what shark you're talking about. Tim backed off and let Duke adjust the rope and testing the knots. There's been reports from marine biologists of a bigger than usual basking shark that hangs around Gotham and its waters. You might have just had it run-in with it. With his checking done, Duke got Tim's attention, and Tim began his own inspection as Duke took over talking. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of Gothamites on Tumblr that keep calling him Basking Shark George without the E. Danny's face scrunched up at the weird spelling, but nodded. A little weird, but it's Gotham, I guess. Tim snorted and nodded at Duke that he was all good. Duke nodded back and started running in place while shaking out his hands. We really don't have to do this if you don't want to, Duke. Tim grabbed the loose end of the rope and threw it over the horizontal part of the truss, and after it came down, he threw it over once again. Duke looked over at Danny and gave a sharp smile. Nah, this is fine. Just gotta get warmed up in case I have to make some fast adjustments. Tim's right on the always be prepared for the worst, and I don't feel like testing my luck right now. Before Danny could reply, a polite cough from Tim turned their attention to him. All ready? Duke and Danny nodded. Good. Danny, I'll help you pull Duke up at first, but after that you should be able to do it yourself. I still need to check if my phone is in working order because, while I trust that it could survive the waters, it's best to know in case something happens to Duke's phone. Duke walked over to the railing as Tim handed Danny a section of the rope and brought up the rear. At Duke's nod, they started pulling him up. Immediately, Danny noticed a difference in his ghost and normal living human strength. Wow, I did not realize how much of my ghost strength I took for granted. Is Tim sure that I'll be able to pull Duke up by myself? They had quickly got Duke, who had made already ball of light, up to the halfway point. So Tim started to lessen the amount of pulling he was doing before eventually just letting go. Danny slipped forward a bit, but was able to keep hold and walked backwards as he pulled. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Tim pull out his phone, which did, thankfully, turn on. Once Duke was a few feet from the truss, a dark mass appeared from the darkness and landed next to the rope. Danny paused and slowly looked up. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Somehow, some way, Mothman was watching Danny and Tim as it stood on the truss right above Duke, who was hanging there by his armpits, unaware of the suddenly very real and possibly very dangerous cryptid above him. Tim looked up from checking for anything wrong with his phone to look at Danny, who was gawking at and frozen at seeing the group's new addition. His friend slowly put his phone into his pocket and grabbed his camera. Tim started frantically taking pictures like his life depended on it. At this point, Duke's voice trailed off as he realized that Danny and Tim were very much not paying attention to him. They were reacting to something above him. Danny took a step back on instinct, but it only caused Duke to be pulled towards Mothman. The cryptid looked down just as Duke looked up. There was a beat of silence before Duke started screaming and started to wiggle around and stopped giving off light, plunging the bridge into darkness. Get me down right now. Jolting back into his senses, Danny bolted forwards, ignoring the animalistic screech and metal banging above him, with Danny blindly reaching out to grab onto Duke's feet. Behind him was a zip sound, and moments later, sounds of fighting came from above. A foot hit his shoulder, so Danny scrambled to grab onto it, tugging his friend back onto the bridge, and then scrambled to help Duke get the rope off of him. Danny yelled out for Tim. Tim! Not hearing Tim respond, he whirled around to where he last saw Tim. Danny's blood turned ice cold as he saw a phone and his camera lying on the pavement. It's got Tim! Oh, ancients, Duke! Mothman took Tim! Danny turned to look at Duke, who just chucked off the rope and grabbed his friend's hand and pulled him up. Of all the times I can't leave and show back up as Phantom without blowing my cover. Danny, it's alright. Tim can take care of himself. He'll be fine. Honestly, I'm more worried about Mothman at this rate. Tim looked super pissed off last I saw him, Duke said as he patted Danny's shoulder with a gentle smile. A thud came from next to them, and both of them looked over to see Tim. His friend was more rumpled than injured, and did indeed look pissed off. I'm alright, stop worrying about me, Tim stated, patting himself down, then fixing his clothes and hair. Mothman flew off, and I highly doubt that it'll be back for another beating so soon. I think that we overstayed our welcome, though, so we should probably head out, right now. Tim threw a thumb over his shoulder where there was flashing red and blue lights, which was, luckily, on the other side of the bridge from where the car is. Duke cursed to himself and grabbed onto the piece of rope. Fucking lazy bastards. Of course this is when they decide to do their damn job. Come on, we gotta bounce. Duke started pulling on the rope and unwrapping it from the truss. Get your shit packed. We're getting ready to book it. I don't want to explain to Bruce why we got arrested in the morning. Tim nodded and jogged over to his stuff and grabbed them. Danny hurriedly went to pick up their bag and ran back to Duke, holding it out to him in time just as Duke finished spooling up the rope. When Duke shoved the rope into his bag, the light started quickly moving towards them. The teen grabbed his backpack and began running to the car. Running behind Duke, he looked over his shoulder to see Tim pulling up the rear and wearing a manic grin. Danny couldn't help but grin back at Tim when they made eye contact. Looking forward, Danny couldn't help but laugh into the night as his friends laughed with him. The off-ramp came into sight as they could hear the cops slamming their car doors to do a foot search. All of them stopped laughing, but kept booking it for the ramp. Exhilaration filled Danny. He rarely gets to have just fun and exist to him as himself with friends. It's not like I couldn't just bail us from jail anyways. Oh man, it was such a good idea to tell Duke about my intangibility. They practically flew down the ramp and tore through the streets in a straight shot to the car. Once they got to the car, Danny went behind it and sat down on the curb. Smiling up at his friends, who were unfairly breathing just fine, Danny tried to catch his breath as he talked to them. Oh man, that was so much fun. We gotta do it again sometime. Tim gave a low hum as he flung open the passenger door and messed around with a plastic bag. Duke chuckled as he walked over to Danny and plopped down next to him, then slung an arm around Danny's shoulder. Looks like someone is an adrenaline junkie. Running from the cops shouldn't be something you want to do. But this is Gotham, though, so I'll give you a pass. Duke winked at him. Danny sheepishly laughed and picked at his jeans. Yeah, that sounds bad now that I think about it. I meant more like... Danny frowned as he tried to think about what he wanted to say. Doing something fun without getting in trouble? Does that make sense? Duke looked thoughtful and took a moment to answer him. It does, though we shouldn't hunt for cryptids anymore. I don't know if my heart could handle a scare like that again. Danny barked out a laugh and patted Duke on the shoulder. Danny gave his friend a shit-eating grin as he spoke in a teasing tone. Aw, is Dookie Pookie scared of an itty-bitty moth? Duke squawked and shoved at Danny, who just laughed. Knocking on the car trunk caught their attention to see Tim smirking at them with a coffee can in hand. Tim pointed with his coffee can at the bridge where the cop car lights began moving again. As nice as it is to see you two bonding, we should take our leave while we still can. No sense in running from the cops, then being picked up right next to the getaway car. Duke nodded and stood up, then offered a hand to Danny, who took it. Duke unlocked the car and opened up the driver door, but stopped Tim from opening his. You go ahead and sit in the back, Tim. If we get pulled over, I'll just say that I'm driving my sleeping brother back home from a photo shoot or something. Gotta have a cover story. And even Gotham cops won't kick up too much of a fuss when there's kids involved. You two have some serious baby face going on, so it'll be fine as long as you two can act like you're sleeping. Tim's face scrunched up, but went to open the back door anyways. Duke grinned as his eyes took on a joking glint. Besides, you gotta learn to be less paranoid around the newer editions. Weird cover story, but alright. Tim glowered at Duke as he went inside the car and slammed the door. I feel like I'm missing some type of joke here. Deciding to not ask about it, Danny opened his door and slid into the seat from earlier. After setting his backpack on the middle seat, Danny looked over at Tim. Oh wow, Tim, you look like the adrenaline crash is hitting you hard. Maybe you should try to sleep on the way back to the manor. If anything, Tim looked like he was more done with life when he finished talking. All Danny got in response, though, was Tim chugging the rest of his coffee while flipping him off. He rolled his eyes at Tim, being petty, and looked out towards the bridge. The cops are almost off at the bridge. Good thing Tim pointed them out to us, or I'd have to bail us out of jail. Danny smirked to himself. At least I have experience with that. It'd be even easier since it's the living side of jail. There'd be no problems for me, even with passengers. What are you smirking about back there? Duke said as he turned on the car. It'll be funny to mess with them. About how easy it would be to break out of jail if we did get caught. Wouldn't be the first time I broke out of somewhere. Tim fumbled from where he was putting his empty can down, and Duke braked the car in the middle of the U-turn he was doing. Jail? You've been to jail? Tim looked angry as hell. Why were you in jail? What type of jail were you put in to call Gotham's jail normal? Duke didn't add anything, but was white-knuckling the steering wheel. Danny was shocked because he didn't expect such a strong reaction to something that's now more of a funny memory to him. It wasn't really my fault. I accidentally lost my parents' anniversary present, and it ended up in a place that I got caught sneaking into. So I was put in jail. Tim's jaw fell open, so Danny waved his hands in front of him. It's fine, really. I was able to escape pretty quickly with the present. There was a beat of silence when Duke spoke up. How long did this whole thing take? Surely your parents noticed that you were missing. or got told that you were in jail. At that, Danny's shoulders hitched up. It was a few hours in total, and my parents were across the country when it happened. They didn't know about it, and I never told them. To stop himself from rambling more about Walker's prison and possibly blowing his normal human cover more than it already has, Danny messed with his hands that were laying on his lap. Another round of silence, then Tim broke it. A few hours. You got sent to jail, broke out, and retrieved your parents' anniversary gift. In a few hours. Tim sounded like he was barely holding himself back from murder. Did you not get checked into jail? Allowed to speak to an attorney? Danny shook his head. A long exhale came from Duke. The cops were approaching the off-ramp. The cops are getting closer, Danny said meekly. That was a terrible joke to make. Why did I think that it was a good idea? Now they're going to think that I'm some delinquent who likes to run from the law. Goodbye, new friends, and hello, societal isolation. Nobody moved for a bit. Then Duke drove the car back into the right lane and drove off. Danny sat still and quietly stewed in regret. Tim just leaned back and took in a slow, deep breath with his eyes closed. For a few minutes, they sat in silence, and Tim went from doing meditation to a light doze. There was a flash of light from Tim's side of the car, so Danny looked over to see what it was. The light came from a text on Tim's phone, and Danny immediately judged Tim. Seriously, who sets their phone to show messages without a ringtone? He was about to settle back into his seat when the phone flashed again, and Danny accidentally read the text. Burnt Robin Nugget. What's up, fucking STEM nerd? Burnt Robin Nugget. Do you still have some Cobalt 60? I only need 3 terabecquerels worth. Danny, sure as hell, did not want to deal with whatever that's about and why Burnt Robin Nugget needed radioactive materials, or why Tim would have enough to just straight up hand out. Not my money, not my circus, not my monkey, not my circus, not my monkey, not... More flashes came from the phone, so Danny reluctantly accepted his fate and decided to reach over to tap Tim on the shoulder. The older team opened an eye to stare at Danny, who wordlessly pointed at his phone. Tim blearily looked down at his lap, where his phone was doing its best attempt to be a strobe light. Thanks, Tim mumbled as he turned off his phone and went right back to dozing off. Mood, dude. Sitting in silence quickly made Danny aware of just how tired he is. Fighting at all times of the day and night, every day, really took a toll on his sleep, and Danny had spent most of his downtime in Gotham sleeping. Sam and Tucker really are such good friends. He smiled to himself as he let his head lean on the window. They would have stayed in the hotel room with me at all times if I didn't talk them into enjoying the trip. Danny closed his eyes as he enjoyed the moment of peace. Sam and Tucker are spending way too much money on souvenirs for me, though. Do we really even have enough suitcase for all of this stuff? Duke made a sharp turn, and a weight fell onto his shoulders. In response, Danny shifted so that Tim wouldn't wake up with a sore neck and a headache. Well, it might have only been less than 10 minutes since they left the bridge. Danny was close to falling asleep right then and there. The warmth of a fully living person warming up his not-quite-alive body relaxed his muscles. The lulling sound of a car also made it hard to stay awake. A soft chime from up front made him open his eyes, and Danny saw Duke answer his phone. Since he was speaking softly, it was comforting in that special way of falling asleep around friends and family. Danny let out a content sigh and then let himself sleep. There is a hand shaking his shoulder. Cracking open an eye, Danny glared at the person who was disturbing his very real, dead-to-the-world sleep that he feels entitled to. It was hard to see who it was because the only lights in the garage was the door and inside the car. When Danny's eyes adjusted, he saw Duke smirking at him from the open backseat door. The teen then motioned at him to keep quiet when Danny opened his mouth. Duke winked at him and then began creeping around the back of the car to approach Tim's side. Seeing what was about to happen, Danny's mouth fell open at the train wreck that was about to unfold in front of him. Tim's door was carefully and slowly opened. The two made eye contact, Duke smiling evilly and Danny gaping. Undoing his seatbelt, Danny bolted out of the car just as Duke slammed the door shut with a resounding bang that echoed across the garage. Tim jumped up from his seat and hit his head against the car roof while Duke bent over laughing. Danny was smothering his laughs behind his hand as Tim glared at Duke while rubbing his head. "You're so on my shit list for that." Despite what was said, Duke kept laughing as he shrugged and started to walk over to the car key shelf. Kinda weird that a tour guide company would just have so many expensive-looking cars on hand. Or maybe it's just really profitable. Do they have high-profit customers? Tim opened his door, brought Danny out of his thoughts, Tim opening his door brought Danny out of his thoughts, so he leaned back inside the car to grab his bag, which was in Tim's hands. Oh, did he think that I forgot it in the car? Tim's a weird guy, but he's pretty nice. Reaching out to take it back became awkward when Tim didn't let go. Danny tugged at it, and Tim let go as if the backpack strap burned him. Right, excuse me for that, Danny. I must still be groggy. He gave a disbelieving, in response to that, but nodded anyways at Tim, then exited the car and closed the door. A few moments later, he started walking towards Duke, who was standing by the garage door. Danny heard Tim get out of the car and close the door. Halfway to Duke, something wrinkled at Danny. He felt like he was being stalked by a dangerous predator. Subtly looking around, he didn't see any animals, cryptids, or ghosts in the unlit corners of the garage. Grumbling at the idea of something dangerous being behind him, Danny whirled around with his hands up to see Tim, about a foot behind him, who startled backwards and brought up his own hands, letting out a shocked giggle. Danny relaxed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Oh, geez, sorry about that, man. I didn't hear you walk up." Tim just slowly blinked, nodded, then let his hands drop. They stood there waiting for the other to make a move when Duke pointedly coughed. Nervously laughing, Danny slowly began inching backwards to Duke. "I think I understand the phrase silent as a grave now." Which got a snort out of Tim, so Danny was counting it as a win, and that he wouldn't have to worry about Tim setting off his fight or flight instincts anymore. Spinning on his heel, Danny heard Tim's footsteps follow him this time. Duke was smiling at them and trying not to laugh. "Come on, Alfred left me some cookies in a time-locked safe that should have unlocked a few hours ago." Duke opened up the door and Tim turned off the lights. A safe for cookies? Okay, not the weirdest thing I've heard, but it's definitely up there. They're probably gone now then. Alfred's cookies always disappear first, Tim said dryly. I'll bet that Dad's fudge is better. The fudge could never be contained by something stupid like a safe. Walking between Duke and Tim reminded him of Sam and Tucker when they would all hang out after school. I wonder how mad they'll be when they find out that I got to meet Mothman and they didn't. Actually, how come they aren't running out to catch up with me? They're always down to break the rules when it comes to hanging out. No, I asked if he could bake me a personal batch since I'd have to cover some of your guys' pet Duke was cut off by Tim swinging around Danny to punch Duke right in the stomach. Duke doubled over and wheezed while Danny immediately turned to drag Tim away from his friend. "What the fuck, Tim?" was breathed out from Duke. Tim just scoffed and swatted off Danny's hands. "Be on the down low, Duke. You know the rules, and so do I." Danny covered up his laughter with a cough. He got a confused look from Tim, but Danny bit his lip from laughing at Tim again. "Have you considered just talking to Duke like a normal person?" Behind him, Duke was still trying to catch his breath, and it sounded like he was laying on the ground. "You could have just covered his mouth like you did to me earlier." Tim opened his mouth to retort, but closed it and stared off into the distance. "Yeah, I could have." The other teen looked over Danny's shoulder to speak to Duke. "Sorry about that, Duke, but you totally deserved it, and that was the quickest way to make sure you didn't break Bruce's rule." All Tim got was a groan from Duke, and Danny giving him a judgmental stare. "The least you could do is help him up. Duke's sharing his cookies with us, and you thanked him by gut-punching him? Not cool, man." Crossing his arms, Danny tried to imitate his mom's disappointed glare that he got whenever he and Jazz got into a fight. Tim got wide-eyed and tried to say something, but ended up sputtering instead. When Tim didn't move to help Duke, he amped up the mom's stare of disappointment. His friend slumped and muttered to himself as Tim walked around Danny and pulled up Duke, who had a shit-eating grin and roughly pushed him after he got up. "Ha! I'm the favorite! Take that, Tim!" Tim shoved Duke in retaliation, and the two quickly started tussling with each other. Danny frowned at the idea of his friends could potentially hurt themselves while play fighting. His protector spirit instinct reared their head. Coughing into his fist to get their attention, Danny gave them a nonplussed glare and raised an eyebrow. Both boys paled away from each other and stood straight. After a beat, Danny snorted, while the other two looked like a mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Tim muttered, "Alfred's going to love Danny. I just know it. He's gonna be the favorite, and they haven't even met." Duke jabbed an elbow into Tim's side, in which Danny very graciously didn't react to. "You see that, Tim? I'm Danny's favorite, which means I can get away with more stuff than the rest of you." Tim looked affronted and was about to pick another fight, so Danny sighed, which got them to stop fighting, even though they both looked a little nervous at him. Giving them a "I'm dead inside and I make you dead outside, and I'll make you dead outside" glare, Danny waved towards the manor's side door a few feet away from them. "As much as it's nice to see you two getting along so well, what can't we go inside the warm, dry, non-windy manor and eat cookies now? It's like past midnight or something, and I'm hungry." The two exchanged looks, with emotions changing too quickly for Danny to read. In sync, they turned to look at Danny and nodded before walking the last stretch to the door. A blink later, it was open with Tim already walking to the kitchen and Duke playing with the edge of his jacket sleeve. Shaking himself out of his stupor, Danny walked into the manor and closed the door behind him. "You guys are weird." Danny pointedly ignored the amount of locks that Duke was setting. It would only prove his point anyways, and the best way to deal with weirdos is to ignore their idiosyncrasis. Duke shrugged, then slung an arm around Danny's shoulder. Duke led them to the kitchen. You'll get used to it eventually. I sure did, but they're a good kind of crazy." His friend leaned close to him and stage whispered, "Tim's the weirdest of us all, though. The guy always has something going on, and it's a whirlwind to learn what he's been up to every single time." Danny looked at Duke in confusion. How does a tour guide have such a wild life? Is Duke just pulling my leg or something? How do I even respond to something like that? That's fair, I guess. Gotham is weird, so it wouldn't be far off that Tim's weird too. Nailed it. They had just turned into the kitchen when Duke bumped into Tim because he was standing in the doorframe for some reason. What's with you today? Duke said as he grabbed onto Tim's shoulder when he almost fell backwards. You don't pull the creepy Victorian sick kid act as much anymore. What's got you in a tizzy? Danny felt his brain stop working. The what act? You know what? I'm pretty sure that falls under the not my circus, not my monkeys thing. He steadfastly ignored the little thoughts niggling at him that Tim could be a vampire because of how he looks and talks. Can vampires age? I'd have to ask Vlad that, but I don't think he's an actual vampire, which is good, because I don't want to talk to that Fruit Loop. Bringing himself out of his thoughts, Danny saw that both Duke and Tim were staring at him. Sorry, I zoned out. Is it cookie time? Duke did a full-body laugh and walked over to where the cookie safe is at, while Tim smiled as he shook his head and went to grab them all plates. Feeling like he was not being a very good guest by not helping, Danny just shuffled over to the counters and sat down after slinging his backpack onto the ground behind his chair. It's still weird that a safe is needed for cookies. As he waited, Danny realized that none of the lights in the manor had been turned on. How can they just see without light? I don't think that Tim's a meta. Either him or Duke would have mentioned it by now, right? Huffing at himself, Danny put his jaw onto his palm. That's another point to the vampire argument. Maybe that's why Tim lives in Gotham. Eternal darkness, cursed to be in the depths, and depravity and sin you shall be, and all that. Man, Gotham's curses are no joke. Hearing Gotham's spirit mutter that into my ear as a greeting at 4 a.m. will haunt my nightmares forever. So glad that I don't live here. Covering up a yawn, Danny heard his friend walk over to him. All right, I have a baker's dozen, so I'm calling the extra one as cookie compensation. They're all chocolate chip as a heads up. Duke plopped himself into a chair on his left just as Tim laid out plates in front of them and sat down on Danny's right. It's all right. Danny cut himself off with another yawn. It's all right. I like chocolate chip cookies. Oh, Tim. Danny spun around to face him as Tim jolted and looked at Danny with wide eyes. Yeah, is there something that you need? Tim said after regaining his composure. Danny felt Duke pull up his chair closer to the other teen, but he was too tired to comment on it. Cookies plinked onto his plate, but Danny didn't reach for them just yet. You left your bag in the car. Are you fine with that? Would your cameras get, damped sitting out in the car overnight? Tim blinked slowly at him, then grabbed his own 4 cookies when Duke didn't hand them over. The cameras and related items will be alright, sitting in a garage with a controlled environment and plenty of security. A lot of those cars are very expensive, and there have been people that have tried to steal them before. Nodding at that answer, Danny turned to his plate and began eating. They sat there silently, eating cookies in the dark. When Danny had reached for his 3rd cookie, the light turned on and there was a screech from the doorway. Danny heard his hiss of pain from the sudden light, be joined by Duke and Tim. You guys, way to give your oldest brother a heart attack. Can't a guy just have a midnight snack after setting up an entire bedroom by himself in peace? First was standing with a hand on the light switch and holding his other hand against his heart and breathing erratically. Wait, why are you all eating cookies at... First trailed off. Rapidly blinking away the dots, Danny frowned into his cookie. Did First say oldest brother? Is Duke his sibling? that would explain why he was able to just bring him along to a volunteer job. Duke spoke up. It's 12:34 a.m. Geez, Dick, you act like you've never raided the kitchen for cookies with your brothers. Danny choked on a bite of cookie. Brothers? He squeaked out. No way. Please tell me that this is just a prank. Sitting upright, Danny looked between them all. Duke and First were looking at him with concern and worry, while Tim looked like the cat who caught the canary. Ignoring Duke and First, asking if he was all right, Danny put his elbows on the counter and buried his face into his hands, then nervously giggled into them. So many things make so much more sense now. Oh, agents, Sam and Tucker are gonna kill me. Jazz will kill me. I'm gonna be grounded for the rest of my half-life. His heart and lungs stopped working as the shock overcame his will to pass as a normal human. Forcing himself to breathe, Danny took a slow breath in, held it, and slowly let it out. A finger tapped on the counter right next to his elbow caught his attention, so he looked at it, following the hand up to Tim, who was grinning like a crazy person. Do you understand now why I asked you during our little chat why exactly you got into a car with strangers? End notes. Duke, I'm so cool. Look at me doing all these cool things that I can do. These cool things are totally easily achievable and normal to do. Danny, also doing said cool things. Finally, someone with good fucking taste. Tim, stop fucking around trying to look for Mothman. You don't know what diseases it has. Wait a second. Tim's phone. I believe I can fly. Gravity handing it concrete shoes. No, you're sleeping with the fishies. Basking Shark George. What an interesting hitchhiker. Me cackling at the Bat Kids, getting more and more concerned for Danny. More. Duke and Tim. What the fuck do you mean? It's alright. Duke and Tim fighting. Tim used gut punch. It was effective. Duke used acting hurt. It was effective. Danny accidentally inflicting psychic damage used disappointed look, raised eyebrow. It was super effective. I forgot to add this part to the end of to the end tags of chapter 3 after a scene rewrite. Jason, I annoy the rich fucks with my crime alley accent. It also reminds them that while I might be part of their circus, I am not their monkey. You know? Dick, Jaybird, I think you're forgetting that you're also a rich fuck. Jason, I said part of their circus, but not their... I said part of their circus, but not their monkey. I'm just here to steal from the burgerias. Little Red Robin Hood, if you will. Also, Tumblr post that started all of this. Phone still in his shoulder. Oh, wait, what? Nah, this is fine. Just gotta get warmed up in case I have to make some fast adjustments. Tim's right on the always be prepared for the worst. Also, I just realized I didn't give Duke... Nobody moved for a to make sure you didn't break... Did you literally... Coughing into his fists to get their attention, Danny gave them a nonplussed... It would only prove his point anyways, and the best way to deal with weirdos is ignore their idioticness. It would only prove his point anyways, and the best way to deal with weirdos is ignore their idiosyncrasis. Yeah, we'll go with that. Danny accidentally inflicting... No, she's not. And that was part 6, chapter 6 of It's a Reflex, a DPXDC podfic written by Coffee Loving Hermit and read by Summer Audio. This was so funny. I had so much fun. I hope you guys enjoyed, like, the little blooper segment. I'm planning on adding that to more of my videos just because, why not? I know there's not a lot this time, but, like, usually I'm just, like, or, like, fuck, whenever I mess something up, so usually there's not really anything to, like, go by. Like, there's not a lot of funny parts, but I had so much fun with the end of this. Danny finally figured out, and Tim is just like, yes, finally, it's amazing. It's so funny. I was having so much fun with this. It's just amazing. Also, not my sibling coming into my room and being like, is mom in here? Like, bestie, why would she be in here? Why would she be in here? But, this was a lot of fun to podfic. I just enjoyed it so much. I had so much fun. My phone almost died in the middle of recording, but now that this is done, I'm gonna finish editing. I'm gonna upload this, and I'm gonna go make some rice, because I love rice. White rice, to be specific, with, like, salt in it, because I'm a basic bitch. But, yeah, that's pretty much everything. Yeah, and, the next part of Press Heart to Subscribe will be coming out Saturday, because I finally, fixed the scheduling problem. It takes a minute, it takes a little bit, to get, like, because whenever I'm late for something, especially, like, 3 days late for something, it definitely screws up my schedule a bit. So, I was just fixing the schedule, doing that, but the next chapter for Press Heart to Subscribe will be coming out on time. We have one more chapter on this, and then it's gonna be over, it's gonna be done, but I do have another podfic that will be coming out, and it's amazing, it's wonderful, you guys are gonna love it. Anyways, if this sounds like it's clipped after I recorded this, it's because I am. Another funny part is that one part where my mom walks in, she was being like, did you really eat all the ice cream? And I'm like, no, I didn't. I left, like, half the container. Which, in my defense, I think I left half the container, but I guess I didn't. But anyways, back to the actual end notes. With that out of the way, because this is long enough, I hope you all enjoyed, and have a wonderful day. Bye!